Previously on Reading in Church and Other Distractions.
I told you Revelation might creep in because this is my last class today for this semester.
Right.
And we teach we build toward the end. Okay.
Sure.
So we build, and the last thing we study is Revelation 5. So we go out on a high note. It's like
that's a good passage.
It's like Karate Kid.
Yeah.
It ends real on a high note, Instead of,
Revelation ends hugging Mr. Miyagi.
Well, instead of Mr. Miyagi smiling and everyone worshiping Daniel-san, it's all because he won the All Valley Karate.
The All Valley Karate Company.
I'm talking about Karate Kid 1, of course.
The original.
Yeah, not any subsequents. Right.
Yeah.
But it ends with all creation, everything in creation, all humanity, all creatures worshiping God and the Lamb.
So the lamb is on the throne.
The lamb is on the throne.
The lion is not on the throne.
No, the lion is never heard from again. I say, how do we understand the relationship between these? My last class, when they took the Narnia route, he's lion. He's like
Aslan.
Aslan, yes. He's not like Aslan.
Sounds like Liam Neeson.
I said, who is worshipped? Is the lion worshipped? And a lot of them were hesitant. And I'm thinking, yeah, okay. In a lot of churches, yes, the lion is worshipped.
Yeah.
In Corinth, the lion would be worshipped.
Okay.
Okay. They want to worship a lion. They don't want to worship a slain lamb.
A slain, broken, tiny little lambkin.
Right. Yeah.
Welcome to Reading in Church and Other Distractions with Rob and Mike. This week's episode, ABBA, Lobster Fisherman, and Dude Ranch Humor.
Well, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Robert Wallace.
I'm Michael McKeever.
And we are in our 5th week of Epiphany.
Wow.
Not the presentation of Jesus in the temple, as some people might think if they were preparing.
That's right. We didn't show up with the same text, but we've come to an agreement.
The old Victor Borge line when the accompanist is talking to the performer, he says, which song should I sing? He said, well, sing the one you like the most, because I'm going to play the one I like the most. So that's what we're going to do here today. But
it's like the Dude Ranch.
We've gotten on the Dude Ranch.
You know that one?
I don't know that one.
It's like the guy's welcoming people to the Dude Ranch. He says, welcome to the Dude Ranch. Don't worry if you've never been to a Dude Ranch before. It's like, we've got a horse for everyone. If you're a big guy, we got big horses. And you're a little guy, we got little horses. And then if you've never ridden a horse before, we've got horses that have never been ridden before.
Nice.
Dude Ranch humor.
They say that for podcasts, that nothing is a win. Like more Dude Ranch humor is what I've been getting on the comments.
Start strong.
Yeah. We're starting strong this week. So it's winter. And still the middle of winter. Is there anything about winter you like, Mike? Mike, you are from California originally, right?
Really cold today.
Is there anything that you like?
It was -4 with the wind chill this morning.
Yeah, that's not one of the things you like, though.
I gave a final, and I said, take everything off your desk, and if you started a fire to stay warm, please extinguish that. Can't have anything on you.
So there's nothing.
The whole discussion of it being a wonderland might be overstated.
Okay, all right. So for you, it's you would prefer the
less yard work,
verdant valleys, and peace.
I like the Epiphany lights and decorations, but other than that,
the Epiphany lights, yeah. Who doesn't love getting out to visit everyone's Epiphany lights? Right. We're really just Christmas lights that no one had taken down.
That's right. That's me. That is me. Until it's April and warm enough to go outside.
Exactly.
They're up.
Well, we have 4 texts again, Isaiah 58 and Psalm 112 and 1 Corinthians 2, and we're going to continue on in the Sermon on the Mount. So
yes.
That should be...
Jesus seemed to be serious about it.
He's on a roll, Jesus. He got going.
There's more?
After the... Really, Jesus, the Beatitudes covered everything, didn't they? No, not yet. Good stuff. So where do you want to start? You're reading the Old Testament passages. So.
Well, I think I'll start with the prophet.
Okay.
Isaiah. All right, Isaiah 58, 1 through, we're going to go all the way to 12? It's 9 to 12 are in parentheses.
Go ahead and read through 12.
Okay.
Why not?
I think the internet has room.
More Bibles, not bad.
Isaiah 58, shout out, do not hold back. Lift up your voice like a trumpet. Announce to my people their rebellion, to the house of Jacob their sins. Yet day after day they seek me and delight to know my ways, as if they were a nation that practiced righteousness and did not forsake the ordinance of their God. They ask of me righteous judgments. They delight to draw near to God. Why do you fast, but you do not see?
Why do we fast?
Why do we fast, but you do not see?
Yeah.
Why humble ourselves, but you do not notice? Look, you serve your own interests on your fast day and oppress all your workers. Look, you fast only to quarrel and to fight and to strike with a wicked fist. Such fasting as you do today will not make your voice heard on high. Is such the fast that I choose, a day to humble oneself? Is it to bow down the head like a bulrush and to lie in sackcloth and ashes? Will you call this a fast, a day acceptable to the Lord? Is not this the fast that I choose, to loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke, to let the oppressed go free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your bread with the hungry and bring the homeless poor into your house? When you see the naked, to cover them and not to hide yourself from your own kin. Then your light shall break forth like the dawn, and your healing shall spring up quickly. Your vindicator shall go before you. The glory of the Lord shall be your rear guard. Then you shall call, and the Lord will answer. You shall cry for help, and he will say, Here I am. If you remove the yoke from among you, the pointing of the finger, the speaking of evil, if you offer your food to the hungry and satisfy the needs of the afflicted, then your light shall rise in the darkness, and your gloom be like the noonday. The Lord will guide you continually and satisfy your needs in parched places and make your bones strong, and you shall be like a watered garden, like a spring of water whose waters never fail. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairer of the breach, the restorer of the streets to live in. Wow, yeah. That's some good stuff there, Isaiah.
That is good stuff. That is good stuff.
Nothing about a servant in there.
No, we've talked a lot about the servant, but nothing this week. Yeah, this is in really the third section of Isaiah. You can break Isaiah up pretty effectively into three sections. In fact, so much so that you'll sometimes hear scholars talk about first Isaiah and second Isaiah and third Isaiah. I'm not one of those scholars. I usually talk about Isaiah when I talk about this, but it is helpful because you are addressing it. I'm not going to call them first and second, third Isaiah, but I am going to say they're addressing three different occasions. Okay. You do have three different times. You have the 8th century in Isaiah, which is chapters 1 to 39. And then you have the 6th century, which is sort of 40 to 50, 55, 56. And then you have the last 10 chapters, which are a little bit later, probably 100 years later.
Fast forward.
And so this is in that third section. So this is, that second section, we're desperate to come out of exile. We're desperate to be restored. We're desperate to come out of Babylon and get our temple back and have that servant and find restoration. The third section is usually thought to be after they've been delivered. They're back in the land and they're practicing their religion again. And so this is now a speaking into that time as a condemnation on your form is fine, right? You're doing fine. You're fasting, you're worshiping, all of that, but you're missing the point that you're not actually.
What is it you say? It might not look like I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah, that's right. I always joke that I always say that I agree with you. Now let me list the ways in which my agreement might not be immediately manifest. So this is you're doing the form right, but you've totally missed the point. Okay. That it's not the fast that I want. Loose the bonds of injustice. The thong, let the oppressed go free. To give bread to the hungry. To welcome the poor and homeless. We're in Micah 6 again, right? What does the Lord require? You do justice, love mercy. What sacrifices would be impressive? Well, you people haven't learned now. 300 years later, we're still having the same problem. Yeah, that the form of your religion is fine. Your worship looks okay, but in the formal expressions of worship. But the point of this is not that you're form is right, but that actually people are experiencing the glory of the Lord, which is not happening.
Right.
So
you're getting to some more fundamental principles that they're missing. I think that is a common theme.
Yeah.
In some of our readings today.
Oh, it is.
I think so. As you go further in the Sermon on the Mount, I think that's. I'll have to ask you questions about. He's talking about fulfilling the law and not abolishing the law, but fulfilling the law. And so,
right.
So I think that's a common pairing here with Isaiah.
Yeah, well, absolutely.
Yeah, sure.
I love 59:9. Anytime in the Old Testament I see "Here I am," I love that, because that is a common response from the people to God. God would say, Abraham, Abraham. Abraham says, "Here I am."
Oh, yeah,
and Moses says, "Here I am." And all these cries. There's a couple of others that I off the top of my head I can't remember. Samuel, that's right. "Here I am," and it's usually right before a mission, right? It's just right before a call of some sort, yeah. And so here, God is the one who says, "Here I am." When you need help, when your life is reflecting justice,
right,
then you call out to me and I answer you. Here I am.
Yeah, I am.
Which is, I just think that's like if we take it that sense of its call, then God is sort of saying that this is my call is to bring justice and lift people up, and that sense of justice is. I just think that's neat, but I always do. I also love that because it reminds me of my youngest child, who, when he first learned to talk and walk, whenever he would enter a room, he would announce, "Here I am," every time he would enter a room. Now, with this child, this is good information, because he was the one who was dancing in the backyard when we didn't realize it, climbed the bookshelf. He, at one point, would climb up on the back of the couch and stand there, and I said, "Thomas, get down from there." And he would leap forward off of the top of the couch so that his butt would hit the front cushion of the couch, and then trampoline him onto his feet. And I always said to Cindy, "How in the world do you punish someone who can obey you with that kind of style?" I mean, that's just
obey with a flourish.
That is absolutely impressive. But he would, "Here I am." So anytime I read these passages, I always hear God or Abraham or say, "Here I am."
And he still has that good self-esteem.
As he announced it.
What I've heard.
He's doing all right. They're teenagers now, so yeah, you deal with that. But anyway, back to Isaiah. Again, it just takes me back to how many times when I was in church and I always heard people say something like, "Well, in the Old Testament, the Jews are under the law, and in the New Testament, they're under grace. And you had to earn your way to heaven in the Old Testament." Right. And it's all legalistic religion in the Old Testament. And it's that thing. When someone says that to me, the one thing I'm certain of is they never read the Old Testament, right? Because all throughout the Old Testament, God is condemning the legalism, condemning these people who get the form and look religious, but whose lives don't actually don't look like justice, whether it's Amos or Isaiah or Micah.
Well, that's when I start Paul, or I start the New Testament, I say, let's deal with some caricatures we all carry around.
Right.
And that's even people coming out of your class sometimes, they forget.
That makes me sad.
Well, I mean, I don't grill them on that, but
yeah, it's quite a challenge to fight against that, even though the Bible is full of examples that run counter to that caricature.
We're just two lone voices in the wilderness.
Yeah, well, see, it's too bad we're not doing Malachi now, but that's okay.
Yeah, that was the alternative.
It was
some really good texts we didn't get to.
Yeah,
that you might have heard on the presentation of the Lord.
Presentation of the Lord Sunday or Thursday when you all went to church on Thursday
for that. Yeah, so we don't need to rehash those texts.
Yeah,
yeah. This is going to be helpful, I think, when we read the next section of the Sermon on the Mount.
Yeah,
when Jesus says he hasn't come to abolish but to fulfill the law.
Well, and I think part of that is that God's point is this is what Torah was supposed to be about.
Right.
That these rules that they're thinking of weren't rules. They were instructions for how you take care of the orphan and the widow and place limits on vengeance and make, reveal a little bit of what the character of God is.
Right. A people of his character.
Yes. Right. That's what he's after.
Yeah.
And then your ancient ruins will be rebuilt. Then good things will happen to you. God will satisfy you continually, and yeah.
So what I'm hearing you say, it's not all about lists and checking boxes.
That's
you
kind
of get that a little bit of that vibe here from Isaiah.
Yeah, that I really, you're going to fast? Really?
Yeah.
Why are you fasting? Does it help? Are you feeding the hungry?
Seriously?
Are you bringing the poor into your home? Were you covering the naked? As you were going through this list, I was reminded, and I don't know where, but this list is echoed someplace. Yes, I mean, first I was thinking of Matthew 25, but
it sounds like James also.
Okay,
and they see the naked and the destitute and needy, and you don't do anything, and your religion is worthless.
Right,
James says.
Right,
and they say James sounds like his brother. So
yeah, and Isaiah.
No, and Isaiah. Yeah. Excellent. Shall we continue then with the psalm?
Sure.
Psalm 112.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go all the way through 10.
Oh, okay.
All right. Praise the Lord. Happy are those who fear the Lord, who greatly delight in his commandments. Their descendants will be mighty in the land. The generation of the upright will be blessed. Wealth and riches are in their houses, and their righteousness endures forever. They rise in the darkness as a light for the upright. They are gracious, merciful, and righteous. It is well with those who deal generously and lend, who conduct their affairs with justice. For the righteous will never be moved. They will be remembered forever. They are not afraid of evil tidings. Their hearts are firm, secure in the Lord. Their hearts are steady. They will not be afraid. In the end, they will look in triumph on their foes. They have distributed freely. They have given to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever. Their horn is exalted in honor. The wicked see it and are angry. They gnash their teeth and melt away. The desire of the wicked comes to nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that is the lot of the righteous, if we know anything, other than Job and some other folks.
Right.
This reminds me of when I first got married, and we lived in an apartment complex, and it was an extremely loud apartment complex near a university.
Oh.
And people would exalt their horns at night and yell about partying. And I took up the practice of exalting my horn in the morning on the way to church. Because being the righteous, I would say, yeah, let's go to church. Woo! Because I'm such a good neighbor.
In this case, their horn exalting an honor. It's a royal metaphor here.
Right.
So we're talking about kingship.
I'm just trying to apply scripture.
We're also, I know. You're so religious.
You gotta live it. I think that's what Isaiah told us.
That's right. This is 112 is in book 5. Remember, our book of Psalms is actually...
Okay, you don't divide Isaiah, but you
I do
divide the
because
Psalms.
the Bible divides
okay.
it, right? I also divide Kings because I have 1st and 2nd Kings.
Okay, Bible guy.
And I have book 1, book 2, book 3, book 4, and cleverly titled book 5.
Or 4 books of Kings, depending on what Bible
well, that's true. That's true. We wouldn't want to put those out who might be reading it
and
that
then a
way.
reboot in Chronicle.
That's right.
It's not nearly as successful.
Much like Spider-Man. But we have, this is in book 5 of the Psalms, which is an exilic book. And these books probably are reflective of when they got composed. So, people will add songs to the songbook. I mean, as the set list gets bigger and bigger, this is what's, eventually they've added these. So these are probably post-exilically coming together.
Oh, okay.
Maybe even coming together contemporary with Jesus. We don't know how long it took for the Psalms to kind of get organized into the book that we have it now. Mm-hmm. But this is, I think, clearly a post-exilic one. And
in my church, adding songs to the hymnal.
Yeah.
It's interesting because they do a lot of things by consensus. So we have a hymnal and a supplement to the hymnal.
They haven't made the hymnal. Huh?
Nothing's going to be taken out, and we got to agree on this. So everything's there, and there's a supplement.
And there's other things.
So it's not a revision.
Wow.
It's a supplement.
But I think this is speaking again into that time period when they don't have a king. They're longing for a king. In fact, Psalm 110, just a couple psalms before this, is a very royal psalm celebrating David and David's line. And we're starting to see them, I think, begin to move into a more messianic expectation of kingship, where early in the Psalms, it's a little more concrete, and you're talking about a ruling person. Then as at the end of the Psalms, it's a little more, we'll have a king who's going to be good, who's going to do what God wants, who's going to be the king we want. And so I think that's the time period we're dealing in.
So a bit more idealized, sort of.
In some ways, I think that's their horn is exalted with honor. Is a reference there personally when I see that. But these are again the characteristics of God's people, right? The ones who rise in the darkness as a light for the upright. They're gracious. They're merciful. They're righteous. They deal generously and lend.
This doesn't mean when you get up, how early you get up.
It is not.
Okay.
No, lucky for you, it is not.
You're aiming at my head with that.
No, I'm not throwing at you.
No.
Again, we see that their hearts are firm, and remembering hearts are the places you're making decisions from. So they're not wishy-washy in their decision making. They're steady. And they don't have any cause to fear because they know that they've trusted in God, and God's way is going to bring them success. They've given to the poor. Their righteousness endures forever.
Okay.
These people reflect God,
right,
in all they do.
Yeah.
And so it's a hallelujah. At the beginning, praise the Lord. That's hallelujah, call to praise. There's several of those together here. So
nice.
So again, echoing Isaiah. Nothing.
Yes. Yeah, they're doing the right things. They're not just saying.
Right.
Not just praising, but they're doing concrete acts within the community.
Yeah, and even look around 5 and 6, where they conduct their affairs with justice. Their righteousness will never be moved. Justice and righteousness, again, although they're different words in Hebrew, we said they're the same words in Greek,
right? But
they're in parallel.
Here
with each other. It's well with those, they're remembered forever. I mean, those verses.
And it's nice how they're illustrated here by how their actions, their righteousness.
Right.
Yeah, that's helpful.
Absolutely. So again, it matters. Your faith is lived out.
Yeah.
Here, that's an important.
Well, and then we're going to see about being a light. Light comes up in Sermon on the Mount, City Set on a Hill.
It was in Isaiah too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. So I know we won't be able to catch these common themes every week, but I think there's some intentionality there, clearly.
Your light will break forth for the dawn.
Yeah.
You're a light for the upright.
Yeah.
And we'll get into the light later. Yeah. Anything there that you want to talk about? Not as much. I mean, we have the fear of the Lord. Oh, one other thing that I can say, the happy issue at the beginning, the Hebrew word is ashrei. It's actually the first word the Psalter opens
Rob, there's
with.
Nothing here I want to talk about, but go ahead.
I'll keep talking. There are things I want to talk about.
All right.
Ashrei, happy, or sometimes translated blessed.
Yeah.
That it's not emotional in that sense. It's the same word. I've forgotten the word in Greek now.
Makarios.
Makarios. Yeah. How do you go with it in Greek?
I've read too many things recently, and I feel I like the Scottish one. Good on you.
Okay. Yeah. Good on those who fear the Lord.
Yeah. Yeah. Or maybe it's Australian.
That sounds Australian.
Yeah.
We want to get letters from
our
large Australian listening fan base that will criticize us for that.
We'll break into that whole market.
But again, it's that sufficient, blessed, content. I'm trying to think of a good word for it. Is there, and also that concept of fearing the Lord again. Again, remembering that. Notice how here too it happens in Psalm 19. But fearing the Lord and His commandments are in parallel. Yeah. That Torah and fear of God are the same thing. Okay. That when you fear God, and it's what I said in an early podcast. Fear of God is a recognition of position. God is God. I'm not God. I will do what God has asked because He knows better for my life than I do. That is fear of the Lord. That's what the Torah is. Torah is God knows better for humans' life. This is God's instruction for how to live life well, take care of the poor, take care of the orphan, lift them up, do these things. So those are in parallel. This is Hebrew poetry is defined by its connections and its lines that often relate to one another. Yeah. And a lot of times those lines are saying the exact same thing using different words. Those are called synonymous parallelisms. And so here, we have fear of the Lord and commandments in parallel with one another, which is interesting because it gives you a sense of what they're thinking. Those things are equal.
Yeah, you can test out if you're if you're getting off track.
Right.
It's It's redundant.
Right.
I mean, in a sense. I mean, all human communication is redundant because people want to be understood and get their point across. And but this is inherent in the genre, right? In the poetry. Very semantic parallelism as opposed to like phonetic parallelism, more common in Western poetry. The sounds. So meaning, parallel meaning rather than parallel sound.
The problem you get there is that Hebrew, like a lot of languages, is inflected. And so it's not hard to rhyme when you have an inflected language. All the masculine plural endings sound like masculine plural endings.
Yeah, that's no big deal. Yeah,
right? See, in English, we're not inflected language. You do clever rhyme schemes.
More of a challenge.
And you go, oh, wow, I didn't, I was just reflecting this week on the Hamilton mixtape that Lin-Manuel Miranda released after he did Hamilton. And the rhyme scheme that he came up with in this hip-hop song for Puerto Rican was amazing to me. It's just this 4 or 5 rhymes that if he can be a beacon, and I mean it was amazing the way that all worked through. So rhyming in English.
Something about bacon too.
I don't think bacon was in there. No, it was beacon, not
something
bacon.
else. It was a different.
But that was another. I'm sure it was another hip hop song you were listening to about bacon. Yes, that's what I'm sure.
That was Tasty P.
Yes, your street name.
Tasty pork.
Anyway, we're in the Old Testament. Let's not do pork right now. Right. But in English, it's much more of an artistic challenge to rhyme. Right. In Hebrew, it's not. So I always, with the students, I always say they rhyme the meaning rather than they rhyming the sound.
Rhyming the meaning. Yeah.
And you can even see them do a really clever synonymous parallelism with a chiasmus.
That'd be a good name for a podcast, Rhyming the Meaning.
Rhyming the Meaning? I would think synonymous parallelism with chiasmus was what you were thinking. I think that would be a more targeted audience.
We'll test those out with the focus groups.
Both the focus groups, both the literature professors.
We're
from
still
someplace.
shopping.
I think we settled right on being in church. Okay. But look at what happens in 7 and 8, where they're not afraid of evil tidings, their hearts are firm and secure in the Lord. Then you open in verse 8, their hearts are steady, they will not be afraid. So you have... It's a synonymous parallelism. They're saying the same thing, but it's a chiasmus where it's ABBA.
Inverted parallelism.
Yeah, an inverted statement.
ABBA always used to do. The sensational singing group.
I don't know that ABBA themselves did.
Oh, no?
They did chiasmus, did they?
Maybe I'm reading too much into the name.
I think you might be reading a little much into
anyway.
The name. Oh, my gosh.
It's not an essential that we agree on that.
Okay, we'll agree to disagree, right? Fact check, mostly false.
Let's just start with agree to disagree.
Yeah, there's a podcast.
That's what we say right before we turn on the mics.
All right, agree to disagree.
Okay.
Yeah. So now, is there anything you'd like to talk about?
No, that was the stuff I really wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Thank you.
What do you want? Do you want the gospel or do you want...
Surprise me.
Surprise. Well, let's finish with Matthew because...
Oh, we're not finished, but okay.
Let's finish with the Matthew text.
Okay.
So let's do Corinthians first.
Oh, finish with... I see. Okay.
Yeah. So let's do 1 Corinthians 2. Right. Do you want me to go all the way to 16?
Sure.
Okay. When I came to you, brothers and sisters, I did not come proclaiming the mystery of God to you in lofty words or wisdom. This is the second time he's tried this, but we already have decided he has lofty words and wisdom.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Well, we'll move on. For I decided to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and him crucified. And I came to you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. My speech and my yes, Paul seems a timid fellow. My speech and my proclamation were not with plausible words of wisdom, but with a demonstration of the Spirit and of power.
Very mellow.
Yes. Chill. So that your faith might rest not on human wisdom, but on the power of God. Yet among the mature we do speak wisdom, though it is not a wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to perish. But we speak God's wisdom, secret and hidden, which God decreed before ages for our glory. None of the rulers of this age understood this, for if they had, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, what no eye has seen, nor ear has heard, nor the human heart conceived, what God has prepared for those who love him. These things God has revealed to us through the Spirit, for the Spirit searches everything, even the depths of God. For what human being knows what is truly human except the human spirit that is within? Sure. Mm-hmm. So also no one comprehends.
Let's go with that.
What is truly God's except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit that is from God, so that we may understand the gifts bestowed on us by God. That's where he was going.
Probably a chiasm in there.
Yeah, sure. And we speak of these things in words, not taught by human wisdom, but taught by the Spirit, interpreting spiritual things to those who are spiritual. Pretty empty word without the word spirit there. Those who are unspiritual don't receive the gifts of God's Spirit, for they are foolishness to them, and they're unable to understand them because they are spiritually discerned. Those who are spiritual discern all things, and they are themselves subject to no one else's scrutiny. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ.
All right, let's break up into groups and see if we can find any keywords that are repeated there. Remember what I said about people being redundant because they want to be understood?
Wow. Is he being redundant again?
Well, a lot of spirit there.
There's a lot of spirit there. And spirit. Wisdom.
Yes.
See, where I came from, and I came from a very traditional, Georgia. Conservative Southern Baptist upbringing.
Okay.
And in that, and not, I would not say not so much there, but in my time when I was in Mississippi, I was at I went to a small Baptist college in Mississippi, and there were a number of sort of non-traditional students there who were working in ministry who came into our religion department to get a degree and get some, I would say to get education, but they were there to get a degree.
Okay.
And
I met that student.
One of the things that they would quote when they wanted to downplay the value of education was verse 2. That they don't want to know anything
really?
But Christ crucified.
Okay.
And that's all they need to know. If they just know Christ crucified, then that's it. They don't need to go and take, intro to New Testament or learn fancy words like chiasm or
and if they did get
parallelism.
A good grade on that essay, then they would talk like the rest of Paul and say, no, what I said is really good. Let me just explain it to you.
Yeah, they just wanted to know Christ. So that was a justification for ignorance.
Okay.
That once you learned that word, then you didn't have to learn any other words.
Well, yeah, if they knew what that meant, that okay, yeah, but that's not this. That's probably
that's not Paul's justification for ignorance. That's all I want to know.
Probably not ignorance, but something else.
Change a tire because I just want to know Christ crucified.
Yeah, I'm worthless around the house because I'm so spiritual.
So I would ask you first, unpack that.
I'm going to entertain that reading, but I'm not sure.
You wouldn't prioritize that reading?
Disagree. Yeah, that sounds lazy, actually.
It sounded very lazy to me, too. As I found wonderful devotion that came out of studying, they found nothing but toil and...
Well, some really good students can come and just want to get an A or get a degree.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. I really wanted to have a conversation, and I really wanted you to learn, not just check this box of learning sort of thing. Yeah. No, I think what's probably going on here is a continuation of what he's talking about, the foolishness of this world and the ways of God that this community is going to reflect. And it went so well last week with the readings, all the readings working together in the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. There's this upside down world and community that's reflecting God's character somehow. And so he started talking about the foolishness, the things that are foolish included last week, previously on Reading in Church, the foolishness of the cross, okay? And then the foolishness of those chosen, the Galatians, not many of you were high status or nobly born, etc. Yeah.
No, Corinthians. We didn't know what book we're in.
Yeah, we were in 1 Corinthians. we're going to work through Corinthians. So we're in Corinthians 1.
Okay.
So the foolishness of the cross, the foolishness of the Corinthians themselves, the selections, they're not like anyone's early drafts. Maybe they're undrafted, okay, by other teams, okay?
Yeah.
And now it's Paul. Paul, when he came to them, he was foolish in his, he's not impressive. Right. He knows rhetoric, but he might not be as impressive as other rhetoricians. And so he's talking about foolish things, and the third one would be himself. And he talks about that from time to time in his presentation, his means of persuasion and communication, and his maybe not being as impressive as, well, other apostles they're chasing after, like Apollos. Yeah. So, as I think we said in another podcast, if you read this through Acts, he's just come from Athens. Mm-hmm. And some people say, well, he tried that wisdom stuff, that smart book, fancy book learning in Athens, and that didn't work. So this is his new approach, which is probably not the case either. These might not be quite as back to back. The planting of the church in proximity to his leaving Athens, but here this is an ongoing correspondence. We don't know exactly when 1 Corinthians was written. He was there for some time, and they had an ongoing correspondence. So, so he points to himself as an example, kind of he bears the characteristics of this upside down kingdom, and who God chooses and how God uses them. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think we probably mentioned that they are mixing in some ideals from Greek culture and Greek mystery religions that might value both wisdom and eloquence, but also understand them as a means to salvation, or part of that that wisdom that comes and gives you a revelation that sets you apart from others,
and that secret, special, hidden kind of wisdom that you got to be on the inside to learn the handshake for.
A lot of that language in the second half of our reading here is probably quoting back their own language, but with a Christian, kind of like, oh, you want to talk in those terms? Well, we can talk in those terms. Mm-hmm. It's not as though there's no wisdom and there's no mystery or secret nature, or there's not people who are mature and understand it. But it's not like you guys are talking about. Mm-hmm. So there's a hint of irony, but he's not saying that those things don't exist. But it's probably overlooked or discarded as foolishness by your standards and by the world standards by which you seem to be embracing in your new fad you're chasing after. So that is it's a continuation of his thought, and it's a lot of adaptation, probably adoption of this language of the whole second half about the mystery and the
who knows what's wise and who doesn't, right? The people who have the Spirit of God can judge the God things. Mm-hmm. You guys have the Spirit of people, so you can only judge people things. But we've got the Spirit of God, so this is a God judgment, right?
Right, and it is a spiritual thing. It's a spirit thing, as he quotes, and I don't have the reference here. 2:9. And I think he changes the quote slightly. What no eye has seen, no ear heard, nor the human heart conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. That's one of the prophets. Mm-hmm. What is that?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's each other on the spot with these quotes.
These quotations. I can look it up quickly if you'd like me to try.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
I just know that he's quoting their language. He's quoting scripture back to them. It's not as though these things are hidden, but they're hidden like in plain sight because it's foolishness or something like that. And he also doesn't want to, he's kind of critiquing them. He doesn't want to say those things they're enthusiastic for, spiritual things,
right,
and gifts, and knowledge. Those are things they've probably got from him when he's planting the church. He's enthusiastic for spiritual gifts. He says he didn't come with these persuasive things, but he came with demonstration of spirit and power.
I noticed that too when you were talking, when I was rereading it this first time. Those who are unspiritual don't receive the gifts of God's Spirit for their foolishness to them.
Verse 14.
And it immediately triggered in me, well, that's where we're headed, right? Yeah. We're going to 12 to 14 here. Yeah. And so he's wanting to, well, you're not going to get God's gifts if you don't understand that, that they're foolishness in this.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're using them, as he announced in the first chapter, they're using them in a very human-centered way, in a way that separates people off from each other.
Right. Division.
Some of this language that he's using for spiritual mature and or immature and mature, spiritual and unspiritual that's actually their language. He doesn't normally use that language. You don't find that in his other letters. Mm-hmm. That's probably him reappropriating their language and trying to salvage some good out of that. Okay. A little hint of irony, critique in how he's adopting their language, But he is sharing some common ground with them. He says, we could talk in these terms. These are kind of foreign ways to think about it, because certainly we don't want to separate ourselves off, or anyone who has the Spirit. There's not like spiritual Christians and carnal Christians. If you have the Spirit, then you are a new creation in Christ. So though he shifts into we language, notice he's saying we have received, we have not received the Spirit of the world, but the Spirit that is from God, so that we may understand the gifts bestowed on us by God. There are some commentators that talk about we apostles and church planners as opposed to you guys, but I don't think that that's what he's saying. He's saying it's not a us and them sort of thing within the church, but it's those who have received God's Spirit as opposed to the world.
Yeah, well, that's where they are the ones who crucified him, right? And the they, that's the them in here.
Yeah.
And then we seem to, I would be with you. I would favor your reading. We seems to be the ones who have received God's Spirit.
I think that makes a much coherent message from the second half of our reading from 8 on. So that they are the outsiders, and we are all on the same page here. We've received the Spirit of God. So it's foolish for us in a negative kind of way to separate ourselves off, or to have this party spirit, or separate off into factions, right?
Yeah,
so
like Apollos or Cephas or Paul.
And these are the kind of spiritual gifts he's really going to talk about in 12 and 14 of the later in the letter, knowledge and wisdom, and this kind of insight that God gives, but for the building up of the church, not for the boasting or exalting yourself or your group, your clique. Yeah.
So knowing nothing but Christ crucified is not an excuse to not study. Is that what you're telling me?
No, I mean, these people are zealous for wisdom and knowledge, and that is good. And so he can say he knows nothing but Christ crucified, but there's this wisdom and this power and this knowledge that comes in Christ crucified. That's not that is no small thing.
Yeah, okay.
That is no small thing. That is
also, it's an oxymoron. I mean, from a Jewish perspective.
The Christ crucified?
Yeah, Christ crucified.
Christ crucified.
That makes no sense.
The Messiah they were longing for.
Yeah, the Messiah who's going to come and bring
in
peace
the
and be the ideal king, crucified. That makes that's jumbo shrimp. That makes no sense at all in that regard. So once I understand that oxymoron, then we'll then I'll have wisdom.
Yeah. Yes.
Absolutely.
So this is a pretty thoroughly developed argument. He even uses rhetorical, technical language here. So they know he knows good rhetoric, but it's not used to impress people. And he may not be impressive. I'm not sure to the degree to which he's not impressive, or that's just a tack he takes here. Although there's some other letters. I'm not
impressive, and then he uses this amazing argument.
Yeah.
Kind of, I'm not impressive.
When he says they're not impressive either. And that may not be so much really giving us a lot of insight about Corinth, although it may, because there's some of that comes from the text he's quoting. He's taking up their language and also some biblical text. So you got to qualify this. We don't know everything. It's hard to know everything through a letter.
Well, we're hearing one side of a cell phone conversation, right? And so some of it you can get, but some of it we have no idea what the reference is.
Yeah.
That's harder.
Those who are spiritual discern all things, and they are themselves subject to no one else's scrutiny. Now, I forget what that might be about, whether that's a Paul thing about being judged by people or not. But I don't know that he would go there. He's really including them and not setting himself apart. For who has known the mind of the Lord so as to instruct him? But we have the mind of Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can know what God's about.
Yeah.
And it doesn't look right to the world.
There's no way to know these things by human standard, by human means, or even the most exalted and eloquent and powerful, seemingly. But he says, no, these things are only known by God. And he quotes the scripture back there in 9, and then uses some psychology that maybe we had to keep going through as we were reading through it. It's like, it's some dense reasoning here. But it is to say that, no, there's some extraordinary things we learn through this seemingly foolish act of crucifixion and resurrection, and then the pouring out of the Spirit. Wow. We don't have to chase after these other things.
Okay.
Yeah. Things that the powerful and the exalted in this world, in that world they were thought to be knowledgeable,
right?
And all these things they're striving after. Well, those people crucified Jesus,
so they don't know anything.
Yeah. What do they know?
Right.
What do they know? That would have been a shorter way of getting at the point. Paul.
Well, what do they know?
Yeah.
So, are you ready for Matthew 5:13-20 again?
Again? Yes, yeah. We lost this section of our podcast.
It was a great conversation.
It was great.
Brilliant, actually.
You know, the album American Idiot, someone came in and took it when they were done, and so they just recorded a whole new, different album.
No kidding.
That's
almost what happened here.
I think the takeaway here is that one of us is an American idiot.
Or at least one.
Challenge.
Let's just go ahead and open that up to the possibility.
That's the only overlap.
There could be others.
There.
All right, Matthew 5:13-20. It's a very familiar passage.
It is.
You are the salt of the earth, but if salt has lost its taste, how can its saltiness be restored? It's no longer good for anything, but is thrown out and trampled underfoot.
And then I think I said something clever about throwing salt out in the Midwest.
I think that's right.
It's coming back to us now.
Now, you are the light of the world. A city built on a hill cannot be hid.
Maybe it wasn't that clever.
It wasn't. But you know what? I think we're going to do better this time. No one, after lighting a lamp, puts it under a bushel basket, but on a lampstand, and it gives light to all the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish, but to fulfill. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one letter, not one stroke of a letter will pass from the law until all is accomplished. Therefore, whoever breaks one of the least of these commandments and teaches others to do the same will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever does them and teaches them will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and the Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven.
Okay.
So I told you before, and I'll say it again, this passage always triggers me from my Hebrew class because when I was taking Hebrew with Dr. Laird, I always struggled with the vocab for city and light, because light is or and city is ear.
Yes.
And they're spelled totally differently, but homophonetically, is that a word? Homophonetically? I just make that up. The sound of them is close enough that in my mind it caused problems.
I do that a lot with languages.
And so I don't know how many times I did. So my best friend, Brian, who's now a pastor, would always tease me about, you're the city of the world. A light on a hill can't be hid. No one puts a city under a bushel basket. Always tormenting me with that.
He just did that off the cuff.
He did.
Okay.
He did. And
right.
Dr. Laird at one point called me out. I'll never forget. Someone got stuck on the word, and he goes, no, wait, I want Robert to tell us what this word means.
Teachable moment.
I got it wrong.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it's, what are you going to do?
I think I asked you about lobster fishermen at this point. Like, who said that?
No,
was that your nemesis you always tell me about?
It was not my
And then I made a
lobster
plea to lobster fishermen who might be listening to the podcast that we're not talking about them.
We had half a chance to revisit that and not let it back in the podcast.
It's back.
It came back in again.
Yeah.
So,
I'm a hoarder. No words thrown away.
Not my nemesis that said that.
Okay.
That time.
Just to clarify.
But we do have the salt. So continuing on. First of all, can salt lose its saltiness? I don't know how that happens.
Yeah, we were talking about that. One source I read said salt from the Dead Sea, the lowest point in Earth, has so many minerals in it that you could actually. It's not pure salt, so you could leach out salt. Now, but there's a lot of crazy explanations of hyperbole that Jesus uses, and that might be one.
Right.
Because salt losing its saltiness is like might be incomprehensible. What's certainly, if it's possible, it's certainly worthless.
Well, that's true.
Yeah.
We're agreed.
But it might be.
You need to call it something else.
A starting point to show something of how absurd that could never happen. But if it did, how worthless would it be?
Like trying to hide a city.
Like trying to hide a city. A hill would not be a good place.
No, they'd see it.
Yes. Yeah. All right. A city, even before electricity.
And if you put your lamp under a bushel basket, wouldn't the bushel basket burst into flames?
I think that's a hazard.
I think that is a fire hazard, isn't it?
I think it says that on the side of lamps now. Do not
put lamp under bushel basket?
Underwriter's Laboratory. A little sticker. Yeah, always cut that off the
not meant
the
to
lamp.
be used for under bushel baskets.
Yeah, I wish I wouldn't put these stickers on here. So cumbersome.
Oh.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be. It would be dangerous and not be effective in terms of illumination.
So what is happening here?
Well, he is. Well, I think this is coming out of the Beatitudes, the beginning of this long sermon. And I don't know if you've read ahead like I have. He's going to get into some of the commandments right after this.
Sure.
More on that next week, which is actually now. But he is talking about, well, okay, what caught my attention is that we had this discussion when we were doing the Beatitudes about how do you read this? Do you read this as a personal ethic? Do you read this as an impossible personal ethic? Do you read this as only for a little time back then or only for a little time in the future? This seems to be using examples of saying this is now, and people should be able to see this.
Yeah.
If you're doing what I'm saying in this sermon I'm talking about, and I'm not finished with, people will notice this. So,
and our colleague, our historian colleague, likes to point out verse 16 in particular is a Roman concept.
Yes.
That notion that if you let your light shine before others, they will see your good works and give glory to your Father. That's the pater familias. That everything that you do is a reflection on the father of the household.
Yeah. Yes.
And so this is not, it's my life, I'll do what I want. No. You make the house look bad.
Right.
You make your actions reflect directly upon the Father. And that's what he's drawing on to this crowd who's going to be completely familiar with this culture.
Right.
And know this notion of that.
Yeah. Yeah, like today an analogy might be, after you spike the football and do your dance, then you point heavenward because it's all about if the camera's still on you.
Well, sure.
Maybe it's not. Maybe that's not the best.
I don't think that's the best illustration. I think probably The Godfather would be a much better illustration.
Okay.
But we'll do whatever.
Yeah, this is a communal thing. This is a community that's shaped by God's character, and to forget that will make this a very difficult sermon to understand, let alone live out.
Right.
Yeah. So this is a community that's being formed and being described in a way that's going to be evident and different, a light in darkness, and evident to all, a city set on the hill, even as we use that sort of example today to talk about an example for others. Right. So, letting your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father in heaven.
Yeah, it's not about your glory. It's not about you receiving glory for this, right? It's about you doing something which then honors God.
Yes,
by your actions.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's the orientation. And to carry that into the rest of the sermon, I think will be helpful.
Okay.
So, as he's going to get into specifically commandment by commandment, he prefaces that with 17. Do not think that I've come to abolish the law or the prophets. I've come not to abolish, but to fulfill. So this is a nice hinge between old and new, and a good for a conversation where I can ask, how do you read that as an Old Testament professor? Because, when I teach it by myself, I have to speak for you, and I have to characterize.
I actually use this in my
you
class.
Probably use this, and I do. Yeah, I use the Old Testament sometimes.
I always say whenever I make a New Testament reference, make sure that Dr. McKeever heard that I use the New Testament today.
Especially Dr. Mason.
Yeah, right. But verse 17 is one that I use, 17, 18. I'll use that, and then I'll pull passages from James and from Romans and from Galatians, and particularly the Romans and Galatians ones, which tend to emphasize that the law is abolishing, and Ephesians too, where that he set aside the law. And so what I asked the students is, so what am I supposed to do? Right? I mean, it's sort of a group exercise for them to kind of talk through. Here's some different passages of Scripture. We've just cherry picked the word law. Says this here. This says this here. What am I? I had a sausage biscuit this morning. Is that a problem? I mean, it's a problem because I'm allergic to pork. But is it a problem because sausage isn't kosher? Have I sinned?
Was there cheese on it too?
There was not. Well, if there had been cheese, I'd really been bad. Yeah. But the I need to know is this if I sinned, and so they kind of talk through this issue to try to get them to think more about how we're thinking about the law. And
there might be an issue, but not a legal issue.
That's right.
I knowing your allergies.
Yes, knowing my allergies are certainly an issue. Yes. But the way I sort of land with them is that salvation has always been about grace, and the way you respond to salvation has always been our charge. So God Exodus 20, when he starts the Ten Commandments, is I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. Now have no other gods before me, right? So the Ten Commandments are the way in which you show that you are a redeemed people.
Yeah.
And the other laws are the way you show that you are a redeemed people. Well, we get a much shorter Torah in the New Testament, which is love God with everything you have and love your neighbor, which is exactly the same as loving your neighbor as yourself. And I always tell them that's the same charge. You do that to show that you are a redeemed people. That's that you have been saved. And so there are still laws that I think, absent of culture, still show love of God and love of neighbor. So, don't murder your neighbor. Don't have adultery. Those are ways to show love of neighbor. And then there are some, like Sabbath observance, that we have moved from Saturday to Sunday. Yeah. And, we've said the dietary restrictions, thanks to Acts, aren't ways in which now that you can show love. Although I would argue that being a Christian in, say, for example, a Muslim country, where there are dietary restrictions, might be a place where you could follow dietary rules and that would be a way of showing love of God and love of neighbor. And
especially of your neighbor.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the same thing.
Right. Yeah. Yes.
Which Jesus says.
Right.
So for me, what Jesus is doing when I read the Sermon on the Mount is getting at what God was trying to make clear in the Old Testament that was missed by Israel. And that is that it's not the form of the law that's important, but the spirit of the law, the character of God. Yeah. That within that culture, they show characteristics that he's about to unpack and reveal here as well. So he's trying to get at the meaning of the law. If the form is changing.
As you're talking about this, for some reason my mind is drifting back to how people read a syllabus. And how we have to constantly revise it because there's ways of reading around it.
Mm-hmm.
And gotcha. I see the weakness of this.
Yes.
I'll here will be my strategy. And then we have to rewrite it. It's like, certainly we don't mean that.
Right. Yeah. As never underestimate our abilities to get around. I joke with the students at times that when you look in the Old Testament, in Jeremiah and in Job's case, both of them curse the day they were born. And I always point out that the reason you curse the day you were born is because it's forbidden by Torah to curse God or your parents. The punishment is death. But you can curse the day you were born and implicate both God and your parents. So, never underestimate our ability to get around the rules. Is
that what that means?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we're really good at that.
Day. What a day that was.
Yeah. Curse you that day.
Yeah. Talking about the day, Mom and Dad.
Yeah, right. The day Mom heard that I was born and Dad
if you threw that in the face of your parents, that would be, they'd know where you're,
exactly
what the target was.
So we're great at getting around the rules, and Jesus is trying to keep that from happening. That's why I always, say that
it's like the teaching your children not to swear, and they see how many times they can use the swear word in the discussion about not swearing. Right. Is this just my kids?
I think that could just be your kids, but
really?
Yeah, with my wife, the rule about swearing. What are you going to do?
Oh, okay. It's a theoretical. Not.
And now I can find out if she actually listens to the podcast. Okay. So.
Yeah. So there's a whole tradition of those kinds of readings and getting around it, and that makes more sense of some of the commandments he's going to get specifically into 21 following. It makes more sense of there's this whole tradition of swearing, how you get around it, and this gradations of what you swear by, just like you talked about. That starts very early and is pretty fully developed in the first century, the crowd that Jesus interacted with.
Well, don't take the name of the Lord in vain, so we've gone with gosh. Right.
Yeah.
So gosh is where you go if you don't believe in gosh, you end up going to heck. Most people don't know that.
Gosh is going to damn you to heck. Did I say damn? I mean, darn you to heck. Sorry, excuse me.
This is trying to keep this a family-friendly podcast.
Not safe.
Anyway.
Yeah. So it's not an abolishment of the law. It's a continuation of that story. It's a continuing to strive to create that community that reflects God's character, not the character of getting around these things with footnotes and gotcha readings of God's commandments. And to be a teacher of these things. Matthew's such a teacher, and Jesus is such a consummate teacher in this. And then the Great Commission involves teaching these sorts of things.
I can't imagine what that would have. He's already reversed what they were expecting in the Beatitudes, with those who are poor in spirit are blessed. Because obviously those who are rich, he misspoke, right? Because obviously those who are rich in spirit are blessed, Jesus, not you missed that one.
Yeah.
No, those are the poor in spirit. Because you would have thought scribes and Pharisees, they're rich in spiritual things. They're the ones who are blessed. No, Jesus says the poor in spiritual things are the ones who are blessed. And then verse 20, he reverses it and says, because, unless you're any more righteous than the scribes and Pharisees, you don't got a shot. And I mean, so he's reversed it and then talks about exceeding it. This would have been hard on those ears.
This would have been hard.
They would have really struggled with this. Yeah. I think.
Yeah.
I am. So obviously they would have.
Comprehension and then envisioning and living it out. There's some hard things about this, but knowing more about the context and knowing that we do shift gears in a normal conversation when you have a shared presuppositions.
Yeah. And getting them to the point that the rich in spirit are blessed, or the poor in spirit are blessed, because the people who are rich in the spiritual things are so focused on the form, they have missed the substance.
Right.
And that's what we're looking for here is someone who can exceed in the substance of the spiritual things.
And what he's gonna unpack that in terms of specific commandments that get his interpretation that gets to the heart of them.
Right.
Yeah, and that's exceeding. There are people who probably have a very elaborate external form of righteousness that needs to be exceeded because it's actually not righteousness.
It's not righteousness or justice.
And it doesn't command you to God. It's not what God is looking for. Not all those sacrifices.
Amos 5, right? Yeah. That's the whole Amos 5 passage. Your sacrifices stink.
Isaiah 58.
You actually are being faithful in your worship, but you're being unfaithful because it doesn't come out of a heart of justice. It doesn't come out of a heart that reflects my character, so I have no...
Right.
That's the prophets who are concerned about the character as opposed to the form. So it's not like it's any different than what Jesus is saying here.
This
is... The message, Old Testament, New Testament, is the same.
It's a message of radical continuity.
Yes.
How's that?
Yes. It's not... God hasn't changed between the Old and the New Testament, and God's expectations haven't changed.
Don't we deal with that so much? The God of the Old Testament.
Oh, my
I have to start. I say, hey, by the way, let's get rid of some caricatures of the Old Testament as we start to read our New Testament.
Yeah.
God is gracious. God is unilaterally gracious. You can't earn your way into his favors. He's just going to lavish it on you. He's going to expect you to reflect his character. And that story is a grace-filled story. This is a continuation of that grace-filled story.
Mm-hmm. And I do the same thing and try to help them. When we hear the occasion out of which it comes, you hear it better, right? When you know what Mike and Amos are dealing with, and you hear that, you can actually see that grace. When you see Exodus, you can actually see that. But it's easier, I think, in the New Testament. You can get, the prodigal son story. It doesn't take quite as much work on the outside to hear occasion. You can hear it a little easier than you can, the Syro-Ephraimite crisis in early, early Isaiah.
Right, yeah. See, I've had a father and a brother. I think I get this.
I'm following that. Exactly. It's a little harder when the military is coming and I'm trying to make a point.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll struggle through that.
It can be complicated to dip into those texts.
All right. So that's good to know that, it's not that, everybody changes when they have a kid. So
that's
God's new in the New Testament.
He's so different now. Wow.
So nicer. Great.
Yes.
I get that question, but as soon as someone finds out I'm an Old Testament professor, it's 30 seconds
outside of school.
Absolutely. Anyway, so I teach Old Testament. Okay. Really, I have a question.
Yeah.
Why is God so mean in the Old Testament? Always, and I have to. I feel like I'm his PR agent. It's like, well, he's not really mean. You may have misunderstood some of the things he said. You got to take it out of context there. So
I have those same conversations about Paul.
Oh, yeah?
Although less so. But
I would think you would have more of them with Revelation.
Well, that too, yeah.
If you're willing to talk about Revelation, you probably don't.
Yeah, but Paul's like a lightning rod for a lot of people's emotions. Like, what is wrong with him? Why is he so angry? Why does he hate women?
Why does he hate women? That's right. I forgot about that. Because he doesn't.
Because it not be true.
That's why.
Yeah, let's talk about it.
Great.
Since it's not true.
Good stuff.
Yeah. Great.
Well, thanks for listening and have a great week.
Have a great week.